Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Timeline Astrology. This is Gary, and this is the July 2025 Sidereal forecast. So, July is a more heated time, literally and figuratively, in 2025. That's because Mars and the South Node come together in fiery Leo, in the star sign Leo, sidereal Leo. And this is quite volatile. Now, they've already started something, as you can see. As soon as Mars moved in and joined the South Node, we saw the war break out in the Middle East. And this is obviously relevant to Israel because Israel was formed in 1948 while Mars was moving through Leo. So it's another trigger, even more so than in October 2023, which was the last time Mars and Ketu, the South Node, came together. So this is obviously a big trigger for the Middle East. And we're reaching a climax in July. And of course, all fingers are crossed in terms of how quickly, how badly this can escalate in Iran. And we are obviously mindful of that as astrologers and people who follow astrology, that this is a very volatile energy. But even though we can see what's happening in the world, we can bring that into our own personal experience and do something with it. We can be more proactive about it. We don't want to be overly reactive because that's likely also because Mars in the South Node is not just reactive, it's maybe even reckless. So when we see these come together in Leo, it quite obviously shows that some leader is going to make a decision that has massive repercussions and is likely a quote unquote big mistake. There are no mistakes in another way because everything is meant to be. But Mars and Ketu aren't just a combination that shows terrorism and attacks and wars. It's a combination that gives birth to terrorism and wars. And so on it goes. When you see Mars and Ketu come together every 2 years, we see major issues. And then when those issues kick off, that's planting a seed every time for another terrorist group to form or another terrorist with a sense that they need to get revenge. It's not often thought about with Ketu as revenge, but Mars and Ketu both are said to rule Scorpio in Indian astrology. And Scorpio's baser instinct is revenge. This is what Mars and the South Node represent. It's about getting rid of things. It's about overcoming things too. So again, personally for you, this could be a great time to have a breakthrough in this area of your life in the sign Leo. But for the world, as we can see, this is going to be another month of massive upheaval on the planet. Now, when you add that to the fact that in the background, we have Saturn and Neptune come together in Pisces, and Mars in Leo has an eighth house aspect to Saturn and Neptune. And that's very destabilizing for the world. Now, in July, we're going to see Neptune and then Saturn begin their retrograde transits. Neptune begins its retrograde, first of all, on July 4th, 5th and then Saturn later on the 13th. We also have Mercury then go retrograde by the 18th. And so all of these retrograde planets are obviously asking us all to draw within and consider and reconsider what we're doing, and especially not just what we're doing in the more immediate time frame, which is what Mercury represents, but also what we're doing in our long-term plans. Whatever Saturn represents for you specifically, again, this is going to be where you're maybe taking a step back. Maybe you have to come around about it at a different angle and keep an open mind about possibilities that are opening up ahead. Where if you see doors closing, it's a good sign that planets are starting to retrograde and it's telling you to go back the other way and let's try a different route. If you keep trying to push forward during retrogrades, then obviously you're going to be bucking a current that's pushing you the other way. So be mindful of that and be mindful, of course, in the world, this is going to likely just create more instability because the systems, the structures of the world are starting to erode and completely dissolve at this point, you might say. The whole world order is dismantling before our very eyes. That's not dramatic to say that. And as Mars and the South Node come together now and aspect Saturn and Neptune, which are now going backwards in July, everything feels like it's all over the place. And it indeed is. And it has to be. It has to all change. It's all ending. Before we can start anything new, we need to completely create this change in the system. And however that happens, however it happens for you personally, or in your community, or in your nation, or in the world, whatever level or degree it's happening for you, it's happening. You might only look at it on your TV screens, on your phone, and see what's happening in the world and not think that it has anything to do with you. But of course, everything to do with everybody because Pisces, that sign, is all about our connectivity. So how we connect, how the world connects, how things are run, how things are structured, what systems keep everything ticking over is going through massive changes from July onwards. At the same time, we do have other more pleasant transits in July. Thankfully, we have Venus moving into Taurus. Now, although there are some caveats here, as Venus in the beginning of the year in exaltation in Pisces had many caveats because of the eclipses and all of the planets gathering in Pisces, it's almost too complicated to just enjoy things. But now we have Venus move into Taurus for July. The complications is that it joins Uranus by the 4th of July and then it squares Mars and the South Node in Leo. So it might feel like there's this conflict between these enjoyments that you're there likely having with Venus and Taurus. It's very enjoyable. But then it's conflicted with Mars and the South Node in Leo when you see what's happening in the world, for example. Or you have a conflict in yourself around this challenge that you have in your life with Mars and the South Node. And then you have this other thing that's going on that's very enjoyable. And they kind of have to live beside each other in some way. Just as with Saturn and Neptune in a square to Jupiter, they have to also live beside each other in some way, which is, again, the sense of everything falling apart while you dream up something new. And this new thing doesn't seem to be grounded in any kind of reality because how can you when things are falling apart? So then the full moon is on July 10th in Sidereal Sagittarius. Again, I'm using Sidereal, which means the star signs. And so the full moon is called in the Indian calendar Guru Purnima, the day to honor our teachers, our guides, our mentors. Even if you don't have a physical teacher, maybe a tradition or a lineage you follow, just to pay homage, to pay respects, to give thanks for any guidance that you've received in your life. It's actually a full moon in Sagittarius. It doesn't always line up this way, but this year it is. And Sagittarius is about our teachers, our guides, our gurus. And Jupiter itself is opposite in Gemini and is coming out of its combustion. So we're not really clear necessarily about Jupiter type of things, maybe getting the wrong advice or not getting any advice or not being clear about what to do. But as it reappears, we can start to get a sense of what we need to do now. And again, it might be because of things not working out in a certain way or working out in a different way. And then it's like, okay, now this is how I need to go forward. Jupiter in Gemini isn't clear about things necessarily because it's simply too busy. The mind is too busy. And now with Mercury about to retrograde also, the mind is extremely busy and it's hard to kind of just know. And Jupiter is not about working it out like Mercury is. Jupiter is about knowing without having to work it out. So with both, though, you need to have both of them in a way working so that you can make a clear decision about something. You might again have this sense of what is right for you to do, what you need to decide to do, but then Mercury needs to kick in and you need to do the whole pros and cons and work it out and all of that. And again, the reason why it's not clear in July is because Mercury is retrograde. So Mercury goes retrograde from the 18th until the 11th of August. And so we're going to have a sense of not being 100% clear about what we're meant to be doing with Jupiter again in Gemini. Mercury retrograde is actually a busier time for the mind, not a quieter time. It gets quiet in a way in the midst of it. But when it first starts to retrograde, all that happens is as Mercury starts to slow down, our minds speed up. So then the Sun enters sidereal Cancer mid-month and will oppose Pluto. This is just adding further tensions into the mix because, again, we're looking at a Mars South Node conjunction in Leo, the sign of leaders, and then the Sun, which rules this in Cancer opposite Pluto. There's a lot of opposition here. It's even the fact that the nodes are in Leo and Aquarius is showing more of an impulse for revolt and uprising and protest and rebellion. But now we're seeing the Sun, which rules Leo, now opposite Pluto in Capricorn. So again, I'm using the star signs, the constellations, when I say Pluto's in Capricorn. You might think it's in Aquarius. That's the tropical zodiac. Pluto is still in Capricorn in the star sign Capricorn. So Pluto now opposes the Sun And that's also a sense of uprising and power struggles that are going on in governments around the world and with leaders and all of this pushback. As things further collapse, there would be no need for people protesting if things were not falling apart. So all of these signatures, and now with the Saturn Neptune conjunction in Pisces and their retrograde, and Mercury retrograde in Cancer, and the Sun in Cancer, and then all of these opposite Pluto with the nose in Leo and Aquarius, you can see it's this whole kind of dynamic of tension and pushing back against those in power. And with all of the squares that are happening as well, alongside that, there is a lot of tension and angst out there, as you can sense. So then by the end of July, on July 24th, we have the moon join the sun and a Mercury retrograde in Cancer and in the lunar mansion called Pushya. Pushya is all about nourishment and thinking about Cancer and about care and nourishment. It's also about thinking about what thoughts we're nourishing, what are we giving our attention to? It's like whatever we think about over and over, we nourish. It's like when we think things over and over again, when we entertain notions or ideas, this is what Cancer is about, as much as it is about caring for other people. So obviously there's a lot to consider here for this new moon and the upcoming month in terms of what are we giving our attention to? What are we nourishing within ourselves? And with the Mercury retrograde, it's asking us to rethink what our attachments are. And sometimes we need to take a step back, more especially now with Saturn and Mercury retrograding. And I think this is a good time to do so around this new moon on July 24th. There's a shift then by the end of July, which I'll talk more about in the August report, but we have Venus and Mars move into Mercury signs. Mercury still has to finish out its retrograde until August 11th, but as it does so, Venus moves into Gemini and Mars moves into Virgo. There's going to be a lot of sort of afterthought, a lot of analysis after the fact, after the explosive events, after the wars, after the fighting. But we have Venus going into Gemini, which is itself quite enjoyable for sure. But then we have Mars going into Virgo, and Mars in Virgo is more especially a problem because it's opposite Saturn and Neptune. And so the disintegration and the failing of systems continues, unfortunately. But at least with Mars in Virgo, it's more considered in a way. It doesn't just act impulsively, especially with the South Node conjoined in Leo. It's more about, okay, let's think about this. What am I doing? How do I need to do this? It could also be quite strategic, though, as well. So it's like, okay, you have the initial outburst and the initial explosions and the attacks. But then you think about, okay, like, how do we want to approach this? We need to approach it more strategically. So, whatever about how that occurs in wars, think about how you approach your own day-to-day life in a more strategic way with Mars moving into Virgo. So that is the month of July 2025, the most important month in the year in many ways. It's quite a pivotal time. There's a lot of oppositional forces going on into August also. And then as soon as that's over, then we're moving into the eclipses into September, and then again more change. And with the eclipses, the nodal points in Leo and Aquarius, the bigger changes that are happening in our society for the next couple of years is within leadership and social structures. So it's not going to stay the same. It cannot stay the same. And sometimes we have to have a period like this, creating such upheaval so that it makes bigger changes. So I hope you're on board with all those changes in your own personal life. Again, knowing where these signs are for you personally. If you would like to go a bit deeper and understanding your own birth chart using the Sidereal Zodiac, you can join me as a patron at patreon.com/timeline astrology. I go through the sign by sign forecast there for patrons, and you can check it out. So until next time.